I started training, I was seconded from the Navy actually, in 1963. And I was quite surprised to find that there was a sort of a social eminence about physiotherapy female students. The men were largely by Otago standards regarded as doctors manqués. However, the girls tended largely to come from good private schools and were obviously down there to get a nice clean profession, which wasn't as messy as nursing, and possibly and hopefully to acquire a husband in the long run from the medical or dental schools. And quite a few of them did both acquire a husband and a good profession. Others dipped out completely on either side. But there was a herd, a considerable herd of young ladies from Natal, Woodford House and so forth and so on. Their scientific background was negligible. They virtually had to be taught. And I can always remember Enid Gotts giving a wonderful demonstration of electrons moving around in a circle by having about 10 people forming a circle and handing the green core out of plaster of Paris bandages to each other. Whether we really did need the degree of knowledge of electrical equipment that we were obliged to learn, I have no idea, because we weren't able to repair anything like that. So the electrical theory was a bit more than we really needed. The emphasis was, well, there was a sort of three-way emphasis: massage, exercise, electrotherapy. You could more or less divide people's interests up in that way. Hydrotherapy would be regarded as a version of exercise therapy anyway. The school, of course, provided a considerable amount of physiotherapy with all the students there. And the citizens of Dunedin were very lucky there. There was no sort of great waiting time to be seen, as there might have been in Auckland or any of the other centres. The training was over 3 years, although they weren't university years. The first year tended to be, because we were exposed to lectures by university staff, or students actually, high-level med students, for anatomy, physiology, pathology. The second and third year, however, second year was half clinical, and third year almost entirely with sort of lectures. That was when you were out on placement around the country. So the state examination was in two halves, the first part and then the second part. The first year was a preliminary examination. That's where a lot of people founded. And I think in my first year, if you failed that first year, you had to get specially exempted from any consequences, because up till then you more or less had a right to apply for the next year. I'm sorry, for the repeat of a year. But they put a kibosh on that because too much of the class was being occupied by repeats from the previous year. I think there were about 10 in our class of 40 people. Our massage mistress was Gwen Hislop, who was a remarkable character in her own right. She used to always refer to the girls, or anybody for that matter, by their surname. Thorpe, Brown, we've had enough of that. And she had a very crisp, deep voice. She sounded a bit like Nio Marsh, the actor, the writer. Billy McLeod came along as assistant principal before she became principal. Enid Gotts was there and went away at the end of our first year, when we came back, we were advised by the vice principal that she was now Enid Anderson. She got married. Enid Anderson was, of course, the sort of electrotherapy specialist, and she even went off and got herself a wireman certificate so she could repair her own fuses and whatever. There was some horrendous equipment down there. I should think it's all in a museum now. That is probably, come to think of it, one of the most amazing things. When I sold a practice in 1999, the new owners looked around and said, "We don't want all this electro stuff. We don't even know what it's for." And I was completely flabbergasted to think that nobody knew what shortwave diathermy was and what its effect was or anything else about it. In these days of evidence-based treatment, perhaps there might be some reason for that. In those days, everybody knew that these things worked. They had to. In fact, I seem to remember one disgruntled physio student in our class saying at the end of the year, "You know, I think I'll give this job up, this training. After all, what do we do except dilate capillaries?" Which seemed to be what any form of... if it was exercise, it dilated your capillaries. If it was electrotherapy, it dilated your capillaries. If it was massage, it dilated your capillaries. She did actually pursue. She finished the course and she married a dentist. She was one of those that I was talking of. Training was fairly tied up because it was run by the Otago Hospital Board in association with the university, loosely, but it wasn't a university course as such, you know. Which didn't stop physio students doing the capping concert. They always had a contribution to make. In fact, I wrote a review for that. It was based on the early days of television and was a glorified version of The Sleeping Beauty, with commercials popping in at every available moment. You know. The witch descending on a vacuum cleaner from the flies. Great risk. And muttering at the end, "This would never have happened if I'd bought a Hoover," you know, that sort of nonsense.